So we've gone from let's start a meetup during lockdown on Zoom to 1,984 members in the space of 12 months. So I really appreciate that and everyone for getting involved. I know there's a large amount of people on the stream as well. So thank you to everyone for getting involved in that. I just wanted to quickly share sort of our ethos for the evening and everything. But before that, I wanted to introduce sort of our two speakers. So we've got Zach and Peter here. Obviously, you will have seen David Johnson was online. Unfortunately, David has tested positive for COVID this morning. So you're stuck with me delivering a talk that I've already written. So I'm sorry for the disappointment. But yeah, quickly, for those of us who haven't seen it before, just a little bit of an ethos for what we're about. Why is it not working again? Come on. What would it be without a technical hitch? Here we go. There we go. Am I going to have to be like a next slide, please, kind of guy for the rest? Right. So basically, we started this event because in lockdown, we found that the meetup community had kind of fallen by the wayside, and we still wanted a place that people could kind of share knowledge, you know, encourage feedback from each other and really be a community again. And that started online, but it's translated really well into the in-person side of things. And we want to keep that up. You know, this is supposed to be as inclusive as possible. You don't need to have some major senior developer background and know absolutely everything about any particular topic to get involved. But that's, you know, we want everyone to be part of this. So just quick one for me. If anyone wants to follow any more about the SocialCode, they're the best places to catch me. I'll post all the updates on there. Twitter's probably the best one, if I'm being totally honest, because like everyone, I'm a social media addict above all else. I'll go back. Yeah, I've put my talk on first, just so that I can get it out the way so that you don't have to be stuck with me for the rest of the night. A variety of reasons. And people are just looking at the market and going, we have no idea what to look at, how to grow. And I see a lot of people who've made decisions that are not necessarily motivated by, oh, I actually want a new job. They're just unhappy in their current position in their career. And I want to just raise a few things that I've seen that I don't want anyone to accidentally hinder their career. But more often than not, people who are dissatisfied with their career, it doesn't come from, you know, feelings within. In the SDLC, about 90% of people who are dissatisfied with their career have things that are external sources that they can change if they are to address certain scenarios. So I wanted to cover kind of the key issues around that. Next slide, please. There we go. So yeah, like I said, the talk's perspective, this is basically about identifying what matters to you when it comes to career satisfaction. I'm going to cover the 4 key pillars of what the Software Developer Happiness Index, that is a real thing, which I'd recommend anyone goes and reads it. The Software Developer Happiness Index covers what matters most to software developers. It is UK specific as well, but I'm focusing here on providing stats so that you can then, you know, look at what actually matters to you and go and make your own decisions. I'm not going to tell anyone this is how you should go and do things to be happier with your career. I'm just going to pull up some stats and hope that some things hit home and reflect with people. It's not designed to be at a specific developer level. These things are designed to kind of transcend all the way through. And like I said, you know, everyone's different. Not all of this may apply to you. I'm just covering what the data says is real. This sort of report is something that I've read avidly and you can go and read yourself. I just wanted to bring it to light for everyone. So a few quick facts. The main one that kind of got me is that software devs in the UK on average are between 5 and 7% less happy with their career than the average profession. And the one that really got me is that they're 25% less happy than anyone who works in manual labor on average. That's from the OECD that did a massive survey on British happiness as well. And in terms of developer satisfaction with their life and their career in the UK, we're not even in the top 20 countries in Europe. We're not in the top 20 countries in the world. We're actually 27th in Europe and 36th in the world in terms of happiness for people working in the software development industry. And I think there's some key things that need to change. When you look at sort of the reasons why people will be dissatisfied with the industry as a whole, there's only one factor that's ever actually outside of their career. And worldwide, that was political stability and war, which we're quite fortunate not to have any sort of I mean, I'm not going to comment on Boris Johnson, but, we're quite fortunate we're not in a situation where you need to worry about a war going on in the UK at the moment. So the rest of it all really does apply. The other thing is here, a really key thing is developer dissatisfaction goes up incrementally, and then it skyrockets once you get past the age of 30. From the age of 34 to the age of 21, you are 3 times more likely to hate your job, despite the fact that it's the exact same job. So I just kind of wanted to cover off those stats, which I think are a bit crazy, but, go from there. So what we'll cover is kind of the 4 key pillars that matter behind career dissatisfaction, how and why they would affect people specifically in the software development industry, a quick look at identifying what matter for yourself and what you can actually do to look at it before just going, I hate my job, I want a new one, and moving on. And then, a few suggestions. Like I said, I'm not here to tell everyone what to do or how to do it. It's just some suggestions off the back of it from things that I see on a daily basis. So the 4 key pillars, the one that probably comes up most, salary. I'm not going to bring into such and such makes more money, such and such does this. We're not going to cover that. Work-life balance is the next one. And these are in order in terms of what people ranked in the Development Happiness Index as well. The working environment and company culture is third, and then the opportunity to learn new skills as well. So on the salary side of things, according to the DHI, like it says there, the vast majority of developers aren't dissatisfied with salary because it's enough to live. We're quite fortunate to be in a profession where it does provide a very good income relative to the average living income in the UK. I'm not saying that's for everyone, but that's on average. But they are dissatisfied because they see things that make them feel like people earn more elsewhere. And that's about an 85 to 15% split. And this survey was last published in December, so it's not really out of date information either. As far as the average developer salary goes in the UK, don't get me wrong, it is up a fair bit in the last sort of 2 years. We're up a quarter for all developer salaries in the last 2 years. But the median salary has only moved up by about 5 to 6%. So what we're seeing is that there's a big skew going forward. And in terms of the DHI, again, the vast majority of people feel like their peers earn between 5 and 9% more than they do because of myths and stereotypes created by the industry rather than it actually being the case. So if you do think after seeing those stats that a salary increase is something that's going to matter to you, I'm not going to say, right, go and find a new job. That's not the solution. Loads of people love their job and it would be great if we could all earn more. If you like your current role, I'd say consider the following things. Setting a target salary before you go in there, researching positions in the market that are as close to yours as possible. So it's not just, oh yeah, it does .NET or it does PHP. It's working on similar projects, similar areas, things like that. The big one that I wanted to bring up that I think a lot of people in here won't do, that I think is really vital, is the brag diary. It's basically just keeping a list of your achievements at the end of each sprint, working out what you've done that is rewardable and things that have been done well. It gives you that kind of freedom to have that conversation because you can show what you've done with regards to performance. I'm not going to teach you how to negotiate. It's not the top of my list. But if you do want to learn how to negotiate, the 7 Steps of Negotiation video on YouTube from Chris Voss is a fantastic one for salary. If you are looking at moving elsewhere, it's the one time someone like me is probably useful. That's what I do for a living. I'm not good for much else, let's face it. But be firm with what you're asking for and don't be flexible because that's when you'll end up getting lowballed, and don't change the goalpost once you've set what you're after. I think the work-life balance one resonated with me more because I don't want to sit and talk about money. That's personal to people's lives. But if you were to look at the UK, if you look at contracted hours versus overtime, the average software developer in the UK does work a fair chunk of overtime. You're looking at around 10% of their contracted hours as overtime. But 62% of developers work less than 40 hours per week, including overtime, and 21% work over 50 hours. I'll let that kind of resonate with where you are on that spectrum. In terms of whether developers are satisfied with their work-life balance, only sort of 1 in 3 developers would say that they're satisfied with the way that their work-life balance is. But 3 out of 4 consider it essential at the top of their hierarchy of needs in terms of what they would consider, their life satisfaction requiring. So, there's a big skew there, and it's something that's really worth looking at. And I think the key thing here is that work-life balance and flexible working hours are not the same thing. If you're to look at the people who have completely flexible working hours of just get your work done, and you need to do this many hours a week, on average, they're doing 5 times as much overtime as the people who have set hours with a little bit of flexibility. So the vast majority of the people who are in that 21% are actually on completely flexible working patterns, which is something that did really surprise me, but it's something that's worth considering. I appreciate that everyone's life is at a different stage and has different needs, but it's just worth looking at. And again, you can have a look at the DHI and the Code of Hoy surveys that were released in December of last year, just to kind of review all of those things. 82% of developers as well have reported a sense of burnout since the COVID-19 pandemic began. That's one of the highest industries in the world, in terms of percentage. And the vast majority of those developers have reported that it's down to a feeling of poor work-life balance. I appreciate remote working has been fantastic for a lot of people, but it has become incredibly hard to separate that work versus, home environment. And that's led to a lot of burnout. And something that I found really interesting, if you want to visualize what burnout actually looks like, because you don't always see it coming in your life. Here's an example of a GitHub when you do start burning out. The guy who posted this is the lead staff engineer at Stripe. He posted this about 2 years ago before the pandemic happened, but he openly documented his burnout story. If you want to see how that would affect you, he was working the same number of hours each day, doing the same amount of project work, and this is the level that his contributions fell to. It's really important to consider your work-life balance and how that balance of what you're doing actually affects, the way that you're productive. If you're doing more and more hours, you're probably going to become less and less productive with all of those hours that you're doing. And actually, it'll probably render you worse off. That's why you're seeing all these things about, 4-day work weeks becoming, really valid and things like that. So, it's really good to kind of look at those sorts of things from there. But yeah, like I said, if you want to have a look at that graphic, his name's Destroyed Today on Twitter. I can't remember his real name. I'm really sorry. But like I said, he's the lead staff engineer at Stripe. Great Twitter account as well if you want to follow for anything about kind of development updates in the fintech world. If you are looking to improve, it was always going to be one cock up, wasn't there? If you are looking to improve your work-life balance, I would say that looking to engage it as part of your diversity and inclusion platform when the culture platform is being looked at is a key thing, because businesses do implement these policies, and implementing it as part of your D&I platform enables that the culture does not become ingrained in we just work. You are actually building a culture around sorting a work-life balance out. And it's not just about being flexible of, oh, you can, go and do the school run, or you can finish early on a Friday or whatever it is. It's making sure that you're working hours that are actually sustainable, and bringing that up with the D&I team, which I'll be honest, any business that's sort of SME upwards tends to have at the moment, even if it is people who are responsible for other things. That's a really good way to kind of look at addressing the working hour patterns in your current place. If teams are working long hours collectively, discussing what can be done in order to improve it in terms of time management, in terms of reducing workload in sprints. It's a great way to look at it because it's a collective thing. If you're struggling with burnout, it's probably something that's affecting the team as well. And the other thing is, like I mentioned before, if you've got flexible working, are you doing more hours by utilizing your flexibility? If I'm being totally honest, the people that I see doing the most hours are the people who tend to do 5 or 6 hours through the day, go and pick their kids up and wait till the kids go to bed before they do the rest of their hours. They're the people that I often get messages from at 2:00 in the morning going, yeah, sorry, I'm still working. I've just picked up your email now. It's like, I thought you only did 6 to 8, but it seems to happen. In terms of addressing the stigma around not being the one who works the most and addressing your work-life balance, there is a concept called low commitment fear. What a lot of people fear is if they're not doing the overtime that other people are doing, or doing extra hours or whatever it may be, then people will look at them as being less committed to the job. The reality is you're not less committed to the job. You're just getting your work done in the hours that you actually need it to be done. You're not working extra and going ridiculous levels. Why can't you work less if everything's delivered? And the reality is that stigma, it's around a 90% factor of people having a fear of that being judgment and the judgment actually occurring. Again, that's from the DHI. I should have put the source in there, apologies. But if you have a look at the DHI, it does mention that 9 out of 10 cases of people who work longer hours for fear of being judged wouldn't actually be judged on the other end of it. If you do decide that off the back of this, that you want to look at a new challenge or anything, address these things from the outset, set your standards and stick to them. No one's going to judge you for saying you want a 35-hour working week. No one's going to judge you for saying I need to compress my hours into 4 days. Everyone's got a life. Everyone's different. It's gone again. Next slide, please. There we go. So yeah, in terms of working environment and company culture, 60% of you consider company culture to be incredibly important, but only 1 in 4 of you actually think that your company culture is satisfactory. Incredibly, that company culture in businesses that are not software houses specifically, that approval rating falls to below 1 in 12. So it's software houses in particular that seem to be known for that. That's not including digital agencies. This is just specifically software platform houses where they have the highest rating. In terms of levels of satisfaction, the more experienced you are, the less likely you are to actually appreciate your company culture. It's a weird stat, but the reality is that ageism within the IT industry begins around 14 years earlier than any other profession in the UK. The average age a person first experiences ageism within the SDLC is 29 years and 2 months, which is ridiculous. It's 8 years out of university. You know, I think that's absolutely crazy. Glassdoor actually had a look at company culture and also produced something that culture to the vast majority, I say the vast majority, is 53% of people consider culture only as the things that are immediately around them rather than the wider business. So it's about taking a look at the people that are actually around you. Do you like them? Can you get along with them? Do I fit in with them? I'm not going to say start looking around the room now if you're here with any of your colleagues, but, you know, kind of taking that from there. In terms of the company culture experience, it sounds daft, but the main thing is communicating and vocalizing what you want to see, suggesting ideas and contributing your ideas to the team. By creating ideas of what you want to see, people will mirror the image of what you create. You know, we're humans, you know, matching each other is something that we do naturally. And by forcing that culture in to be a better place, it will help you to mirror that environment. In terms of setting your recognition boundaries as well, it's not just management, it's communicating with teammates as well. Ensure that you feel supported, ensure you feel engaged, ensure you feel recognized. They're all things that people consider the highest value in terms of going forward. But I think the key thing is owning any successes or failures as a team. It's not just the one person who messed up. It's not just the one person who drove that success. You work as a team, you own your failures and you own your successes together. I'm really sorry if anyone works as a solo dev on any project, because this is going to be so boring for you. But the key thing, again, this came from, this actually came from the Honeypot Developer Culture Survey that was done at the end of November. Building a trust and autonomy first environment seems to create the highest levels of satisfaction by about threefold within a development team. I will pop links to all the sources on Meetup at the end of this as well, so that people can go and read all of these studies like I was at 2 a.m. last night. But yeah, that's something that is really important. If you are looking to move, ensure you meet as many people as possible. Get to know the environment. You're not just looking to know the person that you interview with. It's fantastic if you get along really well with the person you interview with, but you might get along with them really well and you've got 10 people that you hate that you walk through the door and meet for the first time. And the other thing is, by exploring the product roadmap, you can actually look at discovering what the culture is like. If that product roadmap looks like it's got 150 times as many things as you need to be done in a realistic time frame, then it's probably not a great culture. It's probably a very hard-working, crunch-based culture. Whereas if you look at it and you can see yourself, have an opportunity to grow, learn, and explore, that probably will demonstrate that it's a culture that's very open and very friendly. Moving on to the learning opportunity side of things. Again, the Honeypot Developer Survey, 58% of developers considered learning new skills to be critically important, but only 1 in 5 considered themselves to be doing any more than a little learning. That's in their own, that's not in their own time. This is specifically on the job. This is not related to personal projects, studies, things that you want to do. This is specifically related to commercially. Almost 2/3 of developers consider that learning new technical skills at work is the main priority. A quarter like taking on new responsibilities, just under 15% with the soft skills, and professional certifications with the least. And that's from the Glassdoor survey. But over 60% of developers fear that if they don't study in their own time, that the skills will begin to falter and that this affects their work-life balance because it prevents them from having new opportunities going forward. And that last stat has only gone up year on year on year. About 5 years ago, that was at about 40%, and it's gone year and year and year moving forward. So if you're looking to craft more learning opportunities for yourself, might sound boring, but if you read the workplace L&D policies, you'll be amazed what you can find in terms of how policies exist for funding for certifications, training, budgets, hours within the workday to allow you to train towards those things. It actually happened to me in a previous workplace. I can't remember why, but I was reading a HR handbook one day and discovered that I had £1,000 training budget plus 6 hours a week of my work time to be able to go and study something, but I didn't know that it existed. And those sorts of things, often line managers don't know about it. If you look at training budgets, Cult actually published a survey that said about 35% of teams in the SDLC do not use their allocated training or resource budgets. And that's both financially and in terms of hours that they're allowed to allocate to learning new things. And of those teams that didn't allocate, the vast majority of line managers weren't even aware that they had these budgets to use. It's just something that wasn't raised to them. If you look and explore, I know it's a pain, but if you look and explore and kind of ask around that, you will be able to discover more around those sorts of things. Planning an R&D day into your sprint, if you've got time as a team, increases job satisfaction massively. In terms of the satisfaction around workplace opportunities, you're about 35% more likely to like your job if you have an R&D day planned into your sprint. So to conclude and to get rid of me, the 4 key elements of career satisfaction are often wildly different from what the stats actually suggest. You know, that's data that I've pulled. None of this data is things that I've written myself. This is all data that exists. It's all available publicly. In order to progress kind of your happiness as a person within your career, it's all about identifying which of these pillars matters to you and what you need to do in order to approach and grow that side of things. Look, no job is going to be perfect, but you can strive to create something to improve things for yourself when it comes to career satisfaction. And I'll leave the stats there. They're always there for you to make your own decisions. I'm not going to tell you what to do or how to do it. I just put the stats in front of you, and I thought that it would open the eyes of a few people. Any questions?
What's R&D?
Research and development. So it's just learning new skills, anything like that sort of thing. Anyone else? Toby?
How's your work-life balance?
My work-life balance. It was absolutely fantastic until I agreed to do an MMA fight for charity, and now I'm training 5 hours a day. It's more like my life-sleep balance that's affected at the moment. But no, in terms of work-life balance for me, you know, I know that there's a stereotype in this industry. You can often work till 7, 8 o'clock at night. I'll be honest, I'm out the door at my contracted hours most of the time. And if I'm not, it's because I'm too lazy to get up out of my seat. Anyone else in the room before we go to the Zoom stream?
Do you think, you know, in terms of job satisfaction overall,
yeah,
satisfaction in life,
yeah,
do you think exercising was getting out there probably? Because there was nothing on there about it, but I would imagine it's in this industry. I've only worked in one team, but
yeah,
my team tends to be quite stagnant.
Yeah,
so it's kind of like, with me personally, just doing stuff regularly helps a lot.
So I didn't include the statistics in this because it wasn't in the career framework in terms of satisfaction, but there are actually stats as to how much more you're likely to feel satisfied with your life if you are to get out and exercise 3 times per week. I think it was something like 18 or 19% more likely to feel comfortable with the way that you're living your life. It is in the DHI survey, and they actually have a specific thing on how different types. I've never seen anything more detailed. It's about 90 pages long, but they actually had specific stats on how different types of exercise can make people in the development industry happier. And they specifically said that the most likely to make you feel happier was the one thing that makes you not feel like you're in your chair for the rest of the time, because we spend all day in front of a screen. Anyone else?
You said about the UK not being in the top 20.
Yeah.
What is number one?
Number one. So number one in both Europe and the world is Holland. Every country that's in the top 10, apart from number 9, is European. It's all Northwest and Northern Europe. The only one that gets in at number 9 is Canada. And the only major country that we're kind of ahead of is the US. That's because the average dev in the US still works about 65 hours a week. But yeah, that's all on there. I think second and third were Switzerland and Liechtenstein, but Liechtenstein's tiny. Anyone else? Yeah.
Do you have any stuff about the split between the type of industry? So, for instance, if it's working in a purely tech startup, different to working in fintech, or? Yeah,
so I believe I mentioned it previously that working in a pure software platform house, like a SaaS business, tends to have the highest rate of satisfaction. I will pop on the meetup page probably tomorrow morning, but I'll pop a link to all of the sources that I used so that you can go on. But there is a key link going all the way through. The lowest level of satisfaction in terms of industry was insurance and banking. Anyone else? Yep.
Have you ever run into someone who actually wants to work more rather than less?
Yeah, you'd be surprised. When you find something that you're really passionate about, I find that it doesn't matter whether it's your job or not, or whether you're getting paid for it. If it's something that you really care about, and you find that when people join an industry, that's something that they've always wanted to do, always wanted to work with. I think the most recent one I saw was actually a friend of mine got into a career in the space technology sector in terms of software development. He does about 75 hours a week, and he would not be took away from that screen if you could, I would have to pry him away. So yeah, that it does exist.
Okay. I've got two, if that's okay. The first one is, do you think there's any correlation between the size of the company you're working for and the kind of dip in happiness?
Yeah. So in terms of the relatable satisfaction, businesses with below 30 employees and businesses with above 400 employees tend to be a lot less happy than in between the two. It's kind of a case of it's really small, so we've got to work really hard to grow it out, or we're really big in corporate, so it's really hard to get any change made. And it's kind of finding that sweet spot in the middle. That being said, it does change massively by industry. So I will share the data to look at. Do we have any questions on the stream?
Yeah, someone has said, could you repeat what people are asking into the mic because they can't hear the question? Sorry, that's too late. It's too late now.
I'm really sorry to everyone on the stream. I will do that going forward.
One question, Dale, is what advice could you give to help balance things when just entering the industry? You might want to repeat that.
Yeah, so what advice could you give to help balance things when just entering the industry? I think the key thing is don't put too much pressure on yourself. I'll be honest, I've been speaking to a lot of junior developers lately, and they're always kind of seems to be a stereotype that they need to be doing extra work to learn in their own hours. I think the key one is imposter syndrome, because they've not done it before. They feel like if they come across a problem and they can't solve it, it can quite often be that fear of, oh, have I done something wrong? When the reality is coming across a problem and not being able to solve it and using Stack Overflow is about 95% of software development from what I understand. But yeah, that would be my key advice. That's the only one we've got. Has anyone got anything in the room that they would like me to repeat? Colin?
Why do you think developers are more dissatisfied about 34 onwards?
So that was, why do you feel like developers are more dissatisfied from 34 onwards? The key thing with that, if I'll quote the study a bit more, was that it's a feeling of the tech industry changes so fast that it's kind of, I'm sick of it changing so fast around me, because you know there's a feeling of wanting to have a bit more stability in life when you've got sort of commitments. You know, more people at that age will tend to have families or homes, you know, mortgages and things like that. It's not so easy to just drop everything and move. And I'm not saying this applies to everyone, but I'm saying more so than, you know, sort of someone who's just entering the industry. And I do think that the ageism thing in technology is very real. It's a shame that I have to say that, but I do feel like there is a stigma around people who've been stuck working with one technology for a period of time, have maybe let it become outdated. For example, I work in .NET, and if I see someone who just hasn't kept up with the world and they've been working with VB or all the .NET framework tools for quite a long period of time, they are going to struggle tenfold compared to someone who's been working with new technologies continuously to get a job, even though they may be far more talented at writing C# and far more determined to actually learn any of the new stuff. It's what happens on paper, and it's not necessarily a fair reflection on the people. Anyone else before I sort of wrap up? Zach?
This is one more for you then, stats. Did you ever find anyone who's perhaps overpaid and has a bit of imposter syndrome and kind of struggles from that side?
So do I ever find anyone who's overpaid and has imposter syndrome or thinks they're overpaid? I wouldn't say that I find it as often. I do think that you do occasionally, as with any career industry, you get someone who takes a step up and realizes it was a bit much for them. I don't think that's anyone wrongly pursuing something that's way too big for what they can handle. I think that some people just don't realize the scenario they're in. I think the imposter syndrome, I'd say 99% of cases where people have imposter syndrome or feel as if they're, they don't deserve, they don't feel like they deserve to earn more. The reality is you see some incredibly competent developers who just don't back themselves, who have deliberately taken lower salaries because they don't feel like they've merited it. And it's a real shame because it's a self-confidence thing when the reality is their skills and talents are far beyond that. Right. Anyone else, or should we wrap up? Has the pizza arrived yet, anyone? It's coming up now. Right, so the pizza's on its way up. I'm not doing a stand-up comedy set here. The idea of me presenting was bad enough for that. For everyone on the stream, we're just going to take a quick drinks break while the pizzas are kind of set out and everything. We'll have 5-10 minutes here to let everyone get onto the pizza and to grab some drinks and stuff here. And then we'll move on to Peter's talk. Thanks a lot, everyone. Right, everyone, thank you very much. For those on the stream, we'll just get everyone seated again and then we'll crack on with the next talk. Hi, everyone. Sorry, do you mind grabbing a seat just so we can start the next talk? We've got everyone on the stream waiting. I'll have a look afterwards. Right, okay. I just want everyone to get a chance to be seated before we introduce our next speaker for the evening. Sorry. Hi, folks. Sorry, are we all right just to get cracking on with the next talk? Right, so our next speaker, I'd like to introduce Peter Phale. Peter, I'll hand over to you in 1 second. Peter came along to the last SocialCode and dropped me a message with a talk, not quite like anything I've seen before. So I'm really curious to see this. I will allow Peter to introduce himself, but this is Design Patterns for Your People by Peter Phale.
Do a sound test. Can you all hear me at the back? Give me a wave. A bit louder. Thank you. Any good? I'll get this out of the way. Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Oscar Tech. So going to talk about design patterns and people tonight. I've become clear what that is. Let's press this on. It's all working. So quick bit about me. So I've got a DevOps engineering background. I've been doing DevOpsy things with ops dev tooling and supporting large-scale operations units for the last 10 and a bit years with a range of public and private cloud environments. I'm currently leading up a small agile squad working with AWS, Terraform, Kubernetes, Golang, CI/CD pipelines, and observability tools at scale for fintech company 10x Banking, supplying banking as a service. I've previously done similar things in organizations of different sizes and business contexts with DevOps all the way through. So I've come from a maths background, originally specializing in formal probability and logic, so I'm fairly analytical. That will come across if it's not already. I do a bit of tech coaching, both for the team I'm with at the moment and private coaching and mentoring. I'm interested particularly in organizational design, process design, and a lot of that ties into so writing and publishing I do outside on the future of work things, ties into a lot of the things Ross was talking about dissatisfaction in the tech industry, dissatisfaction in work in general. I do some designing around that and some original thinking. I've got a particular angle I'm iterating on around de-hustling, reducing hours, multiple employment, and it's something I live myself. So in my top role, top there, I'm on a 20-hour week. I do 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. If you're interested in finding out more, come and talk to me or drop me a line, or I'm on Twitter as @PeterPhale. So quick overview. To what extent are people like IT systems? Why do we care? What problems are there in communication that we can attack with an approach of treating people like IT systems? Then we'll look at a handful of patterns and getting insights from them. And the ultimate goal is to show a very human issue, which is difficulty at work caused by communication through a tech lens. It's an approach that comes fairly naturally to me. I've been using it basically for my whole career. I think it's got a lot to offer. And if you're in engineering and you haven't seen things this way before, it's under your nose and free for the taking. So design patterns, there's the very well-known book by the Gang of Four, so-called because there are 4 authors. Elements of reusable object-oriented software, you can see that there. Other than that, I'm taking a fairly broad approach, broad definition of patterns ranging across coding, productivity, and organizational concerns. It's basically anything that encapsulates useful learning associated with a short word or phrase. So start off with why we should think of people like IT systems. What can we get out of it? So on the left, we've got things that people and IT systems have in common. I've stopped assuming IT systems don't have free will because I've got burned too many times. On the right, we have a couple of things, basic things that IT systems do that humans also do, particularly including communicating, which we do in a remarkable number of ways. So DevOps context. Moving things to containers in the cloud changed how we relate to servers. And this pets versus cattle comparison came along. So it's also interesting to use as a benchmark. I'm not going to ask in the room or on the Zoom because it can get awkward, but I'd expect answers to vary across the room as to how close you are or want to be with your colleagues. And that's okay, that's a natural thing, and it's something that changes as the work picture of work changes in the big picture. So previous generations would have had a very different answer to this when you're talking about jobs for life and being around the same people for decades. But what we can probably agree on, though, is that we want any relationships that we have to have, such as working ones, to be positive relationships. And that takes us back to why communication is important. So, just quick motivator on this. Just have a think about, are you happy to take a phone call from anybody in your company that you've never spoken to before, just out of the blue? And So if you've got an engineering background, you've got more responsibility for things like protecting your focus time and protecting your commitments. And that's often a good reason why you wouldn't be comfortable doing that. And that's something that can sit naturally with what your natural preference might be anyway. And think about other roles that exist in the organization and why that's not true for other people. So why is it difficult? So a few reasons. One is it's a fundamentally hard thing to do, communication. So if you take an arbitrary other person and you want to transport some meaning, whatever that means, from you to them successfully, there's a lot of philosophical thought that goes into that. It's not straightforward, and success is never guaranteed for anyone. Secondly, communication creates risks. There are some risks there. I'll talk about the attack surface briefly. So whenever you communicate, you're opening yourself up, and you don't know in what ways you're going to be disrupted. So that can be in terms of your thought processing, your mood, your availability, your time, the commitments you make. So whether it's consciously done or not isn't really the main point here. So people will disrupt you in ways that you didn't ask for if you give them any channel of communication. And that's going to be beyond your control. And finally, on communication being difficult, you've got non-similar agents. So basically, it's not your family. Even colleagues you get to know well, just as with some friends, you may find some differences that you can never bridge, where you'll always need to be careful about how you communicate. So what do patterns achieve? So basically, it's mostly about not reinventing the wheel and reducing the amount of processing you have to do either on the spot or as a redesign. It's also a quick way to establish a common basic understanding, especially if you're among engineers who are familiar with a pattern. You can relate the problem at hand to a prior experience, which can either be your shared experience or an experience someone else has had that you can quickly digest. And these are all similar reasons to why people in sales and management roles, for example, use analogies. So it's about finding that common language that lets you be both clear enough and time efficient. And it doesn't mean that the pattern will perfectly fit the problem in the same way as analogies usually don't, because they're too simple. Design patterns have a better chance of fitting a problem exactly, but even if they don't, they allow you to focus on exactly where the solution doesn't fit, and either use that to suggest a better pattern, or where the underlying requirements need looking at particularly, or where the rough edges are on the pattern that needs smoothing out. And lastly, it lets you use efficient terminology that fits the problem so that you're not trying to invent new language and usage. So first scenario, imagine you're a backend dev, even if you're not, and a client gets in touch with you and they're asking you about a bug. Now it's within your skill set, you're all good devs, that you could go out and find what that bug's caused by, but it wouldn't be a good use of your time. So it's not something you're responsible for. It's not even a system you maintain. So because you're part of this company, you're in some way responsible for that kind of customer satisfaction, but you haven't had specific training on how to handle customers for that company. So what do you do? So this is where we can look at a couple of patterns. The first one, you can put a proxy in between the customer and the solution. Currently, they're seeing you as the solution, and that's not going to work for you. So an example of a proxy would be a ticketing system. So you redirect the customer to a ticketing system, and the ticketing system is watched and works allocated from there. And there's some sort of guarantee maybe in the customer service contract that says, if you put your ticket in there, it will be looked at by an appropriate person. And that's just going to be better than you singling someone out. So even your customer documentation can act as a proxy and a facade as well. So allowing the customer to resolve simple issues themselves and giving them more information up front about how to route issues that they can't resolve. Another pattern you can use is an adapter. So an adapter is something you use to connect people who speak two different languages, domain languages, even though they're dealing with the same underlying system. So your customer service rep would be a good example. They're good at speaking to the customer, they have a good relationship, or they understand what people in the customer's position need, which usually isn't what you're hired for as a developer. That support rep not only speaks the customer's language, they also speak your language. No, that's a huge exaggeration usually, but even if they don't, you can speak to them as if they were the customer, and you're de-risking the situation. You don't need to worry as much about saying something outrageous or insensitive that will harm the customer's relationship with your company. Moving to possibly less constructive patterns now, you can also black hole the customer. Now, we all know that a lot of the time, if you simply ignore a request, it will just go away. I haven't checked. I think this might be about COVID. If you know a system well enough, you might know that a request will go away, and you might also know that it's the customer's fault. And if they try it again, it will work. And if they turn it off and on again, as they've been told to do 30 times, then it will work. So in such a case, black holing may, and I'm not going to guarantee this, it may be the right solution to your problem, and it's an available pattern. And apologies for the triggering GIF. Here's another one. They're getting progressively worse. You can fail fast by attacking the customer. Your results may vary. Let me know how you get on. And lastly, you can deny service. So you might outwardly be cordial with the customer on the phone while you silently cut their access off. Why would you do that? I was trying to think of a really good example for this. It was struggling, but it did remind me of the open source incident at the start of this year. So where the open source developer cut off basically everyone who was using Faker.js and Color.js. And it's arguable about the consequences and the decency of that. But ultimately, I can't rule out that this will be there will be a good use for this pattern, whatever you're trying to achieve. So it's a pattern that may work for you or may not. So the first example was a proxy. Several other examples where you can use a proxy. So separating communication from accountability is one everyone's come across in the wild. You phone up your ISP or your grocery provider, and the person you speak to is not the person who owns the system. So you can see this in an engineering team where you either have a support rota or a separate support team, and they protect the time and attention of the engineers who are building to improve the system longer term. You can isolate vulnerable or dangerous people from communications. This often isn't something you can solve by setting a single standard for behavior, for resilience and tolerance. There are real concerns here, and people have individualized needs. And interpersonally, you may find just two people who get on perfectly well with absolutely everybody apart from each other, and there's no way you can resolve that. So proxying is a way to achieve this sort of isolation in much the same way as if you have a service that will break on ping requests, you might hide it behind a firewall, or if you can't guarantee a base level of good behavior on your network, you might default to putting higher risk systems behind proxies. Lastly, controlling outbound communication. So proxies go both ways. You have forward and reverse proxies. So if you've got a secure service, and certainly true of a financial service, you want to control all outbound communication. So my laptop might be forced to route through a VPN and then through a dedicated egress layer that can handle audit logging and all sorts. You might also decide that if you've got sensitive communications to make, then you channel those through a trained representative or a PR agency, or Homer, who's probably a better representation of the standard manager. Effectively, what you're doing when you ask your manager to handle outbound communication outside the team. So another scenario, keeping the support idea for a moment. Say you receive a request for information, and there are three things you might care about. One is, can you give the right answer? Second, can you respond promptly with something that looks like at least relevant information? And third, what happens if someone on your team is away? Anyone see what analogy I'm driving at? It's the CAP theorem. So from distributed database design. So the correctness of the information is your consistency for your database. The can you get any response that looks like a good faith response is availability. And how you handle people being away is your partition tolerance. Now, I like this pattern because it's a pattern that tells you where you need to compromise. What the CAP theorem says for your distributed databases is that you can't have all three, your CAP, at the same time in their strongly defined forms. You need to relax at least one of them. So basically, as an analogy, I think it's strong enough that it does apply to technical teams as well. Basically, if you're trying to define some sort of robust protocol on your team for ensuring that any information you create is immediately known and usable by everyone on the team, whether that's through chat systems or documentation or whatever, it's basically not going to happen. The closest, I'd love to go into more detail on this, but the closest you're going to get to that is possibly mobbing. So if you're not familiar with mobbing, it's like pairing at scale. You get all your team together and you collaborate, and everyone sees what changes happen all the time. But in general, even in that case, what you're going to lose is probably availability. You're not going to be immediately available to respond to all requests to your team. So it's a pattern to bear in mind when you find yourself reacting. Your managers, they often say, can we just make it best effort? Or can we do it just this one time as an exception? And your engineering idealist inside you might be screaming. But you can remember the CAP theorem and say, actually, sometimes these things do occur in the wild, and my manager might not actually be completely wrong for once. So next one, a bit buzzy at the moment, are personal readmes. Ooh, nice colour. So personal readmes. Say you're a bit of a difficult character with some odd personality quirks. Perish the thought, never met any of those. You might construct this document that says, I am difficult in this way, or you might find these behaviours unexpected. And this is in general how I'm rationalising and why I do these particular things. And it may be to do with how I get my job done. It may be to do with how I am as a person. But I think we're better off all round if you know these things before they become an issue. And so this is a good place for the interpreter pattern. So someone might send me a message of some kind and I respond only with this smiley devil emoji reaction and leave it at that. And by default, they might be thinking, why is Peter being ambiguous and unhelpful as usual? Have I done something wrong? Is it some sort of fetish or cult thing? How am I supposed to interpret this? So what I can do, assuming that this is the level of personality I've decided I want to bring to work, which is debatable, is put into my personal README. These are the emoji I commonly use without further explanation that go beyond their standard meanings. And the smiley devil face means, that's all fine, I'm in a good mood, and I want to convey that I want you to have a nice day and have some fun in your work. And so while that might sound like it's more trouble than it's worth, that's mainly because of the deliberately contrived example. You can do this for a number of things, and interpreting allows you to be yourself at work within reason, while not having to explain yourself every time and giving people the ability to do the conversions themselves. It might seem like unnecessary effort, but people do enjoy having this sort of freedom at work. And without interpreting patterns, people sometimes just communicate freely anyway, knowing perfectly well that they're very unlikely to be understood. So the recruitment one, I won't do a poll, but have a think about if you think, what you think when you find a candidate or someone on the market who has had a string of jobs they've been in for less than a year, how reliable you think they are, whether you're open to that. So it's quite a hot topic at the moment as well, and it ties into things like the market being crazy and cultures being more often acknowledged to be toxic or unhealthy than they used to be, and also people just moving on and continuous careers not being what they were. So I took a 1-year sabbatical a few years ago, and I've had 2 recent roles of under 18 months. And I find hiring managers and recruiters who have both extremes of attitudes, but overall a level of tolerance that's much, much higher than it was 10 years ago and still is in other industries. So the diagram here, I don't know if you can see it at the back, we have a typical familiar conversational flow between a candidate and a recruiter and several companies who, for whatever reason, are obviously wrong for the candidate. It just shows there's, in addition to this, there's a lot more admin work going on behind the scenes as well. And it just shows that the recruitment process is still inherently costly for everyone involved. And the danger is that from your point of view as a candidate going through this process, the danger is that the recruiter and the hiring manager tolerance can wear out even when you have a string of very valid reasons for leaving companies. So what this ties into is the idea of failing fast, which is something that takes us back to the world of pets versus cattle. And the point with failing fast with cattle relies entirely on cattle being cheap. And so if you're planning to job hop ultra quickly until you find the right position, you'll need to be considerate of how costly that is for recruiters and hiring managers. So the tolerance varies. Some great recruiters out there will listen to your story and reasons for leaving and help you detect bad fit in the next role before you commit. It's great if you can do that, and asking questions in interviews is one of the key ways you can find things out that you can save you going through this. Currently, you will find people have a lot of time, not only for people needing to get themselves out of unhealthy work environments, but also a growing appreciation of career breaks and unforced life changes. And with a bit of luck and struggle, we'll continue in that direction. So when don't we use patterns? So we saw with the cat filling example that we might be overdoing it. So it might be completely unnecessary over-engineering, and when things get like that, they can create new problems. So it's quite rare also that you find your team is homogeneously geeky in the same way for applying patterns to processes in the same way as you are, that I am. And almost all of us dislike work getting overly procedural. So because of that, we keep in some human error to keep alive what we enjoy about our jobs. So we never frame it that way to senior management. Also, not everybody knows every pattern, so it may not be the quickest way to communicate something. Particularly for a one-off communication problem, you might be better off using its domain terminology than applying an analogy or a pattern. So going beyond patterns, what can you do as a techie if you don't have an appropriate pattern to hand? Well, then you're basically solving a problem from scratch, doing what underlies all patterns and how patterns come about in the first place, which is working out what your requirements are, and if you need to compromise between them, what the most important requirements for your context are. So it's back to basics engineering, and that's okay. You can balance that any way you want against your requirements and the human side of dealing with things. This option is always there. So thought I'd apply this to ending the presentation. It seems to me there probably isn't a great way to end a presentation with a specific pattern. So we go back to basics and think about what we want from an ending, and think about what you've seen in different presentations. So there's form, so giving you a recognizable signal when the end is. It's not quite yet, nearly there. There's clarity, so going through what the presentation has covered tonight, we've looked at the human problems we can find at work and how that we can put them down to communication, and how they can often be addressed quite effectively using the same design patterns that we're familiar with from an engineering setting. Seen some examples and what the limitations are and how useful they can be. There's good feeling. So in all sincerity, it's been a pleasure talking to you tonight. And thank you all for coming, particularly after 2 years of lockdowns and high risk that we've been through. It's great that you're here. It's great that we can have these hybrid events. And thank you for joining on the Zoom as well. Thank you to all the speakers, and thank you to Oscar Tech for hosting. And there's empowerment. So if you want to find out more, there's the Gang of 4 book for design patterns, lots on the internet about design patterns, and I'm sure most people in this room have their favorite pattern. If you want to find out more about me, come and talk to me, find me on Twitter. If you want to find out more about the issues that came up during presentations, again, come and talk to me, talk to each other, come to the next event, discuss online. And beyond empowerment, there's brevity. Less said about that, better. And there's empathy. So these things are difficult. We do live in a difficult world, as I think was clear from Ross's talk, and that can often translate into the day-to-day reality of our working lives and interpersonal communication. It's okay to find that difficult personally, and you're not alone by any means, as the stats were showing earlier. And I hope some of this helps with some of that. But if not, I can leave you with one pattern that I do resort to every now and again, which is climbing to the box. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Any questions? Any questions on the live stream?
Sorry, Peter, we've got one here.
Sorry.
So do you find, so I guess this use of patterns kind of time seem maybe formulaic, maybe, I'm not saying you are, but in the extreme it can seem a bit inhumane.
Yes.
Do you find you get pushback from people on this kind of mechanical way of dealing with things, I guess?
Yes. So the questions, it can seem very formulaic to apply patterns to people's situations. And do I get pushback? Do I see pushback on that? And absolutely, and it's a balance, right? So it's what I find. I mean, what it's in response to is going the other way, really. So as engineers who care about technical problems and are interested primarily in the technical problems, shying away from the people problems, I find is quite easy, quite common. And one way of addressing that is saying, actually, these people problems do relate pretty closely to these technical solutions and technical approaches that we're used to. So that can bridge some of the unfamiliarity and the fear divide there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
So looking at them, they all seem very proactive. So it's kind of like a first layer. I've got a game plan going into this game. Do you ever have scenarios where you have to be a bit more reactive in terms of dealing with people? And if you've got like a formula, which is basically your game plan with dealing with people, how would you then try to be more reactive if you're trying to base it off a golden formula?
Yes, that's a really interesting one. So the questions about the examples I've given are proactive, and often you'll be faced with scenarios you need to react to, and how do you handle that with a patterns approach? And so yes, I think there's no getting away from the fact that with people situations, with communication situations, you're going to be faced with something you haven't seen before, and it be time pressured. What an engineering approach, what a design patterns approach can be useful for is rationalizing that. So if you get stuck in a situation and you think, I don't understand what this person's trying to achieve, why they're behaving this way, what they need from me, that's something that you can talk through to yourself in engineering terms or to the people around you in engineering terms and try to rationalize that way. That's where I can apply patterns in a reactive way. Thanks.
So obviously you use this kind of in the wild on your day-to-day, but is it something that you use just yourself, or is it something that you employ your team to use as well? And how does it work when they're kind of doing it back to you? Do you ever find any kind of friction there with the same concepts being used?
That's an interesting one. So the question is, so I use this myself, and do I use this within a team or within other teams, and do I get pushback? Do I find friction when it's done back to me? And that's an interesting one. So if I'm coaching people in a team, I will use this as one method of rationalizing something that is unclear why it's happening, or if something doesn't make sense in terms of behavior, organizational behavior, people behavior, then I'll use this approach and encourage it. If I get pushback and it's unhelpful, that usually means there's a misunderstanding or a difference in people's models, people's mental models, which is the same as any technical argument you'd have if you've got a fundamental misunderstanding of either the model or what the optimal solution for it is. I experience it in the same way as that. Yes?
Is there any correlation between your 1 year sabbatical, your 20-hour working week, and average?
That's a wonderful question. The question is there any correlation between my 20-hour week and my 1 year sabbatical and the approach I use? That's an yes, I could go into lots of detail on that. Let's talk about that afterwards. But in short, seeing things this way and being quite merciless in analysing problems, I apply that to the work dissatisfaction problem. So yes, that absolutely informs whether I stay somewhere, what terms I want from my work life. And so yes, thank you.
I have just got one question now. How would you go about encouraging a junior member of the team to communicate more with colleagues / line managers to understand their tasks? I've seen some people who are too nervous even when people are happy to help them.
Okay. So the question is, as a junior developer, how can you, sorry, could I have that?
More with their colleagues and line managers.
How can you communicate more with your colleagues and line managers? Because even when they seem happy to help, nerves can get in the way of that. So I think it's definitely something to look for in the culture of the team you're thinking of joining. And if it's not there, then going back to some of Ross's points about how you can ask for cultural change within your current context is important. I think building that level of trust within your immediate team is absolutely essential to any role. If that is not there, you need it to be there. And that is the first problem to solve wherever you are. If you are stuck in some situation where that's not possible, do look outside for help. Communities like this are very good at validating that the culture is not working, and B, giving you other options to try. So coming to the community, if you can't trust your immediate team, is an option. Within your immediate team, you should get to that point where you can A, trust them, and B, have regular time to talk things through. And that is where you can start to use this approach of rationalizing things as they come up.
And another question, is it a good pattern to disagree with people for technical reasons, or is it better to accept that the majority is right?
So is it a good idea to disagree with people for technical reasons, or is it better to accept that the majority is right? Well, it goes back to a cultural thing again. So I think every healthy engineering team has some room for discussion and debate, and that will be across levels, usually across experience levels. If that's not there, there needs to be a very clear and good reason why that's not there. Time pressure usually isn't enough. At the same time, being aware that time is an issue and constraining the amount that you argue back is usually necessary. You almost never get complete consensus on complex technical issues, and you need a way of getting through that in order to continue delivering.
That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we've got one more speaker left in a few minutes. We're going to take a quick break just for everyone on the stream now, just so that everyone here can enjoy the rest of the pizza that's turned up, get some more drinks. I'll run through a couple of housekeeping rules when we get back, and then we've got Zach. Just a couple of pieces of housekeeping I wanted to run over, before the last thing. There's something I should have definitely mentioned earlier on that I totally forgot to mention. If you want a cigarette, please go downstairs and not out onto the back there. It's a smoke-free building. Sorry about that. But there is a couple of things that are a bit more exciting than that I wanted to cover off. First of all, we mentioned at the last event that the Manchester Tech Week is being headline sponsored by Oscar. And we've got Amy and Dan, who are a couple of the founders of Manchester Tech Week over there. Tech Fest, sorry, Manchester Tech Fest, Manchester Tech Fest. Legally, it's Manchester Tech Festival. It's Manchester. But they can confirm that a lot of their stuff is going live this week. So if you want to keep an eye out for Manchester Tech Festival, please do have a look at the website and everything later this week when it goes live. Is it live now or is it live? Live on Monday. So for anyone in the stream who didn't, yeah, just for anyone who didn't catch that on the stream, if you would like to speak at the inaugural Manchester Tech Fest, please get in touch with Amy or Dan. I will pop their details online after this so you can get in touch with them. Do have another little bit of, well, I say exciting. It's probably the most exciting part of the evening, other than the free booze and pizza. We do our giveaways, and last time we only had one prize to give away, so we thought we'd split the money a little bit this time to get something a bit better. So we've got wireless SocialCode chargers. They do work with pretty much every smartphone going at the moment. I'd just like everyone in the room to have a quick check. If you have a Post-it note taped to the back of your chair, you have won one of the wireless chargers. You got one? What? Does that include us? You got one? Right. Okay. One last thing before we head on to our last speaker of the evening. Obviously, I know that everyone loves, one of the favorite thing about meetups is that we all go to the pub afterwards. So because we're all in here, and I know that that lift can't hold all of us at once, when we finish in here, we're going to the Sir Ralph Abercrombie, which is, if you go between Brewdog and Rudy's in the little archway, it's the little pub just through there. We'll all be there. Thank you to Matt and everyone at Oscar who've kindly agreed to put a bit of money behind the bar for that one. So pints, well, the first few pints on us, we head through. But yeah, that's the general housekeeping, but we will head through from there into that pub. If you get lost, pop it into your phone. We will be in there somewhere. What was the name of it again? The Ralph Abercrombie. I'm not from Manchester. Thank you. No problem. No problem. But yeah, just to introduce our final speaker of the evening. I know that many of you who've been coming to this for the past year will know Zach Hamilton-Bridge very well. This talk is something that I've been looking forward to for a little while. And if anyone says they haven't been looking forward to it, he's a competitive strongman. I don't think I'd mess with him to say otherwise. But without further ado, Zach Hamilton-Bridge.
Everyone, thanks Ross for putting me last after Peter's incredible talk with lots of gifts, jokes, and actual useful information. My talk is called Observability, the good, the bad, the ugly. There's 3 pictures up there. I'll let you take a minute to decide who's who. Sorry, Ross. Admittedly, the scope of this presentation has changed to more of a very kind of high-level look at observability and what it is. Observability is very important. Some people say it's quite boring. I just don't think we have the metrics for it, to be honest with you. So who am I? Just a kind of quick overview. I'm a long-time attendee of the SocialCode. As Ross said, I'm a novice strongman. I competed last year, and I'm hopefully doing some more competitions this year. If anyone wants to sponsor me, get in touch. Thank you. I'm also a gamer, programmer, and a dog dad with 3 psychopathic dogs that I'm glad to be away from tonight. Very, very cute. I'll talk to you afterwards. I don't want to put you to shame. Can't tell you that either, mate. So, what we're talking about, observability. We're looking at what it is, why it's important, why I should even care about it, what happens if I don't care about it, and more importantly, I guess who needs to care about it within an organization. A little quote there, only half the programming is coding, the other 90% is debugging, from Dr. Prog Grammar. Thank you. So what is observability? Observability is the ability to measure the internal states of systems by examining its outputs. Long story short for that is it lets you understand and see how a system is performing, where its bottlenecks are, and where you can make improvements, see if there's anything that's gone down, or just see what the health of that system is. The kind of pillars of observability, as they call them, are logs, traces, and metrics. I like to add alerting in there as well, because it gives you a kind of a full picture of what's going on, and it means you can make informed decisions off the back of it. Yeah, it informs you of issues. It lets you analyze data, trends, pick up action points, both from a technical perspective and from a business perspective as well. There we go. So these are just a couple kind of little graphs to show an example of observability. At the top, you've got more kind of technical side of things in terms of tracing. You've got number of requests and errors, invocations, the duration and latency of those requests. You can get a very high level overview of what's going on in your system and architecture. The bottom one is more business KPIs, and it just shows you kind of what's going on in the business. This isn't real life data, don't worry. I'm all looking at my boss there. It's going to the back. This is mocked out data. So as I said, there are the pillars or layers of observability. There's generally 3. I like to add the 4th in of alerting. The first of these is logging. Pretty much any system you get out there and developing has logs, console logs, stack traces, whatever else that you want. The most important thing for these are that they are kind of a centralized management of an area of a system. You know, it gives you a kind of real-time look at the flow of execution, see how a specific function or module or whatever is performing, and whether certain things in that system are firing as they should be. It can give you contextual information about user data within that flow. Not recommended often to be used in production, but you can use it if you need to. It's great for debugging, making sure systems are working in a certain way at a programmatic level rather than a high level, more higher architectural level. You know, it lets you see if certain data has been updated and whatnot. The next is tracing, and you probably all heard the concept of distributed tracing, certainly in a more kind of microserviced ecosystem rather than a monolith, but it's the same principles apply either way. You get a clearer, wide-angle view of the application, how it's looking. If we go back to here, these are the kind of things that you'd see with traces at the top. So you get a broad look at how the system is looking, and you can see if there are any bottlenecks. You can see there's a spike in invocations at the top right, so you might want to action something off of that. That could be a DDoS attack. It could be a peak in traffic that you want to action off the back of, send off events, whatever. Yeah, so it's sorry, lost my train of thought there. And it also allows you to analyze scopes and manage spans, look at latency timing within that distributed system. The third of the traditional pillars are metrics, and they are quite closely related to tracing, but often either misused or used in a kind of more custom way rather than what's given out of the box. It lets you know not only the performance of the systems, and uses those tracing data to actually build up these dashboards and the kind of centralized view of everything, but you can also use them to see how new features are performing, how certain parts of the system are performing in kind of a more real-time way. You can use it as short-term metrics for, as I said, adding a new feature. You want to know if there's any issues with duplication in a database coming back or something like that. You can use metrics to be pushed off into your cloud provider or whatever you're using, and report off that and act accordingly. Finally is alerting. Most people would know this as the big disco dashboards in your company. In my previous places, they've always been flashing red, never green, which is quite sad, but there you go. That's why we're all in a job. It's alerts are often managed traditionally within tracing and metrics. The reason why I wanted to include it here is that certainly if you're using a cloud provider, you know, AWS Azure or something like that, they're often not real time. And if something goes down, or if there's a serious problem, you need to know about that straight away, not in 10 minutes when the provider's finally got all the logs through, processed it, and then triggered alerts off the back of it. So, you know, some things that you want with alerting, maybe if something goes down off the back of a container restarting, alert it to Slack, or email someone, email the entire company, do whatever, so that you know what's going on and can fix it straight away. So now we're going to look at how you do observability at a very high level again. Again, I'll show you a couple of examples. So login, very crude, don't judge me on these. It was done within an hour, so sorry. So this is looking at a kind of a good and bad example of logging. You can see on the left, while it's not the most verbose, you've got an error to indicate what's actually happened. The success code has failed to come back from the API. You've got the status code, so you know what the issue is. So if it's 401, you know if it's an auth issue. If it's a 404, it's not finding point, whatever. And then you've got the response data. There's probably varying opinions on whether or not you should put that in there. You know, if someone gets access to the logs or whatever, that could be a problem if it's got PII in there, but certainly for debugging, and if you've got a closed loop system, something like that, it can be really helpful. On the right, you've got a very bad example of logging within a system, which gives you absolutely no information at all. It just says there was an error, and that's generally the error that you see in most code bases that you haven't written. So a couple of concerns with logging. You've got the cost and storage costs. Certainly, if you're retaining those for more than a few days at a time, they can really rack up. If your system isn't as efficient as it could be, it's making a shed load of requests, something like that, it can really start to ramp up. Probably more pertinent to startups and smaller companies. Getting lost in useless information, if you're just logging everything out all the time, just logging out the entire request object or the HTTP client or whatever, it's not really going to give you any useful information, and you're just not going to look at it. And finally, red herrings while debugging, because again, you know, all that information that's coming through, it might be the issue, but it could just be a complete, just unfortunate coincidence that that's happening at the same time as the issue you're trying to debug. Even if it's, you know, it could be the same part of the system, a completely different part of the system, and you just wouldn't know, because oftentimes there's no separation between those modules if they're in the same system. So moving on to tracing. Generally, and this is, I guess, you know, again, a very crude look at it. Tracing allows you to see the steps a request has taken, generally from start to finish. You can look at the latency between those requests, what they spoke to at what point, and you can very quickly build up this picture of where things are slowing down, where your bottlenecks are, and where you need to focus your attention really for improving your stack. As for concerns, if you've got a big either monolith or microservice system, it's very hard to retrofit in there. Certainly if you go in the distributed tracing route where you need that tracing ID going all the way through and then reporting off the back of it, it can get very cumbersome, and it's a full-time job in itself a lot of the time. Again, cost and storage, because you've got shed loads of data coming through and it just becomes a nightmare to manage. And yeah, not only the cost of storing, but actually transferring all that data across the wire. If you're using a third-party provider, like Datadog, for example, you have to pay for all that transfer cost from your provider to that provider as well. There's extra cost there that you need to think about. Metrics, I know I've already kind of touched on this quite well. You get a wide array of results at a very high level, and you can see things kind of just at its surface, how it's doing. Some of the concerns for this, as I'll not go into too much detail, I've already mentioned it. If you hand roll them, they can often be very problematic, because you're not, a lot of times people don't think about what metrics they need and what metrics are actually going to be useful. They just kind of do it. Like the examples here, while at the surface look quite useful, they're probably in many cases not, because if you're debugging an issue or debugging a certain service or call something that's on a slowdown or failed for whatever reason, looking at the amount of errors going up tells you there's a problem, but doesn't give you any other information. As I said, they're often not maintained, or just not even removed long term if they're no longer needed, so racking up cost and just bloating your architecture. And probably the most important one here is that each system you make within your kind of architecture will have its own things that it needs to watch out for. So there's generally always commonalities, but for the most part, you want your own set of metrics per system, and that can get quite cumbersome to manage, and constantly iterate on and make sure you're doing as best a job you can for those different systems. Alerts with a couple of examples here. So as I said before, big flashing boxes, real-time Slack messages, emails, SMS, carrier pigeon, whatever you want to do to get that information out to people as quickly as possible. It's something that I don't think is often utilised properly, certainly from the actual real-time perspective. People generally fall back on the traces and the metrics in order to get their information. But by that time, if you're at a massive company doing millions of pounds a day, that could be thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds lost if something's down for 10, 15 minutes. If it's a banking app, you know, people can't access money and stuff like that in that time. So it's very important. Some of the concerns is that, Again, it can get quite spammy. So if you set up a Slack alert because someone did a console log and that console log's hit every time the system's hit, then you're going to get absolutely hammered. No one's going to care about it, and it's going to potentially cost you a fortune again. It's a conscious effort from developers to implement those warnings and alerts into the existing systems and new systems and make sure they all line up and take a form of standardized approach to actually doing it. And that includes what you consider to be a proper threshold for those alerts as well. You know, if they go over certain CPU utilization, if they go over a certain amount of memory allocation, if not enough containers are span up, or whatever it is, you need to be kind of on it as a team or as a tech team and constantly maintaining it and iterating it. Again, each system will need its own set of alerts because every system is different, it's doing a different thing. Again, another thing you need to think about. And as I mentioned briefly, with Datadog as an example, you need to integrate things with Datadog, Slack, emails, whatever you're using. That often has a cost and dev overhead to actually manage and implement initially. So who needs to care about observability? Ultimately, I think it's a conscious effort of the entire tech team, not necessarily one team. If you're in a larger company, it should be everybody considering it. Whether that's back-end, front-end, app development, I think every system has its own set of criteria that it needs to follow. Not necessarily in the same path. You might not need metrics for certain things, you might not need logs for certain things, but there's always something within that system that could go wrong that you need to be alerted on, you need to know about, and be able to see what optimizations need to come about from it. It's important that it's handled in a centralized, unified way. So even though each system has its own set of metrics that it needs to follow, making sure that you're all on the same page with how you want to approach observability and manage it as a team, I think is really important. If you don't do that, you end up with a wide array of standards and different ways of doing things and different opinions kind of creeping in and you end up in a bit of a mess really after a little while. And then finally, there's another reason why everyone needs to care about it, and what you should do about it is that you should be documenting everything you're doing, justifying it if you need to, disseminating that knowledge to all the other teams, and that again should be a conscious effort of the entire team, so that everyone knows what the observability considerations are of this particular system or domain that you're working in. So if they have to move over to that team, if they have to work on that system for whatever reason, debug an issue with it, they know what to look for. And they can just, you know, it's an efficiency concern really, and it just saves everyone a headache. So what happens when you don't really care about observability? Generally, it's a lack of faith in systems from a developer and often from a business standpoint. You know, if you don't know that systems are down, if you don't know that systems are running slow, oftentimes users won't even tell you. I guess that's industry dependent, but I know ours certainly don't for a good amount of time. So you could be down minutes, hours, days before you'd even noticed that there's a problem. By that time, you've lost however much money. Again, you're flying blind. You've no idea how the system's performing, if there are any issues. You can't make any optimizations or kind of cost-saving mechanisms. This is more pertinent to the smaller SME startup type companies, I guess, than larger. But, you know, for those kind of companies, every penny counts. And those issues and inconsistencies and unoptimized issues within the system often end up becoming rampant across all the systems if they aren't maintained very well. And finally, I guess probably the most important one here is that you can't debug anything when something has gone wrong and you're told about it, because you've got an issue, you don't have any logs to look at it, you've no traces, you've no metrics on it. What do? You just say, sorry, I can't help you. It's down forever. See you later, I'm going home. When I said I did this presentation in an hour, I meant it, and that's actually the end of the talk. This is a list of some of the key observability providers doing various different things across multiple different clouds, from use for SME and startup all the way to massive enterprise level. You know, you've got Datadog, which is a kind of all-in-one package, App Dynamics, which is the same, CloudWatch, Azure App Insights, Jaeger, all doing slightly different things, some direct competitors, but using any of them will be a benefit to your system and is worth thinking about. Any questions? No, great. Yeah. Yes, Adam.
Given the prevalence of success stories for big, very mature software houses, I think perfect would be the end of goods with these solutions. We also run the class. Have you got any examples of how you ensures improving the situation of businesses without handling on the extremely mature solution? Both start simple.
Yeah. So the question there.
I was going to say, could you repeat the question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So the question there was. Right, I forgot to start the question. Yeah.
How do you encourage maturing the logging solution or the observability solution without landing on the perfect one?
The question is, how do you work towards improving the observability solutions without arriving at a perfect solution? That realistically probably won't ever happen, I guess. It's a hard one. It's something that you have to work on, I guess, day by day, week by week, month by month, really. You know, as you say, you never find that perfect solution because there realistically probably isn't one. I think for me, the most important thing is, again, to have a unified front going forward. So you all, even though you can't get there with every system, you know, you have some guiding principles going forward with it. If you've got a massive amount of systems, if you can just add some other observability into a couple of them, or the ones that you manage, or you can just make a conscious effort while you're developing, you very quickly chip away at a much larger problem, and it becomes a much smaller problem to the point where it doesn't become a major problem for the business and the tech team if something does go down, or you can then start to pragmatically make a push to getting towards that kind of paradise state of it being all fully observed and know what's going on. Any other questions? That isn't what is observability. Brilliant. Thank you all, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
So we've already given out the prizes. I kind of jumped the gun on that one a little bit. No, in all seriousness, I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming tonight. I first put up this event just over a year ago when we were in tier 3 lockdown, and I was trapped in a 7-bed house share with 6 housemates who'd gone home. So, I mean, to be honest, I live on my own now, so it's probably not really any different. But no, thank you very much to everyone who's got involved in this community. We've gone from that to just shy of 2,000 members in the space of just over 12 months. And the reality is, tomorrow is 12 months to the day since we held our very first virtual event. I'm really proud of what this community has become, and I'm really grateful that everyone's been a part of it. And it's great to see that after such a tough time, the Manchester tech scene is beginning to thrive again and go back to the networking community that we had. Thanks again to Zach and Peter for 2 fantastic talks. Really do appreciate it. Like I said, we're all going to head to the Ralph Abercrombie now. I'll give everyone a couple of minutes to finish up their drinks just whilst I pack away, and then we'll take everyone over there and continue the night there. But thank you again for all of you for being part of this. You can get up and enjoy your beer now.